There's a moment most people over 50 have had without ever naming it. You put the phone down, you stand up, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, something in your body doesn't cooperate the way it used to. Maybe your neck feels stiff in a way that takes a few steps to shake off. Maybe your eyes need a moment to adjust to the room. Maybe you feel slightly off balance, not dangerously, not dramatically, just slightly. And you think nothing of it. You pick up your coffee, you move on. That moment is not nothing. That moment is your body handing you a report. And most people fold it up and throw it away. I've spent years working with adults in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. And when I started asking them about their phone habits, not their diets, not their sleep schedules, their phone habits, what I found was consistent enough to concern me. The damage isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. That's precisely what makes it dangerous. What I'm going to walk you through are 7 specific things people do on their phones every single day that are accelerating biological aging in ways that don't show up until the damage is already done. Not one of these will feel alarming while you're doing them. That's the point. The first one involves something almost everyone does within the first 3 minutes of waking up. You reach for the phone before your brain has finished its overnight reset cycle. This is not metaphorical. During sleep, particularly in the final stages before waking, your brain is doing something neurologically critical. It's consolidating memory, clearing cellular waste through the glymphatic system, and recalibrating cortisol production for the day ahead. That process has a natural conclusion. It ends when the brain is ready. When you pick up the phone and immediately expose yourself to notifications, news, messages, social content, you interrupt that process mid-sentence. You force the brain into reactive mode before it has finished its restorative sequence. In people under 35, this has some cost. In people over 50, the cost is measurably higher. The brain's ability to complete that overnight restoration is already less efficient than it was at 40. Interrupting it repeatedly, morning after morning, contributes to something I see clinically more often than people expect. A kind of cognitive fatigue that builds slowly. Not dramatic memory loss, something subtler, slower processing, harder retrieval, a slight but persistent mental fog that people chalk up to age when it's actually a habit. The worst part is that the phone itself rewards you for it. There's always something there, a message, a notification, something that feels urgent. And so the interruption becomes the routine. If you're doing this most mornings, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because this isn't about willpower or self-discipline. This is about what the brain over 50 actually needs to function at its best, and what this specific habit is quietly taking from it every single day. There's a second thing that happens with the phone that most people over 50 are completely unaware of, and it has nothing to do with the screen. It has to do with your grip. When you hold a phone, particularly a larger device, you engage a specific muscular and tendon structure in your hand, wrist, and forearm in a sustained static contraction, not a strong contraction, a low-level constant one, the kind that doesn't feel like effort. That's the problem. Static muscular contractions, the kind where a muscle holds tension without moving, are particularly damaging to connective tissue over time, and after 50, connective tissue regenerates more slowly. Tendons become less elastic. The small joints of the hand and wrist are already under more stress from decades of cumulative use. What I see in people who scroll for extended periods daily isn't carpal tunnel in the classic sense. It's something that presents more diffusely, aching in the thumb base, stiffness in the wrist that's worst in the morning, a gradual reduction in grip strength that people don't notice until they try to open a jar or hold a heavy bag, and something feels different. Grip strength, by the way, is not a minor concern. It's one of the most reliable functional indicators of overall aging. The research on this is consistent. Declining grip strength correlates with cardiovascular risk, cognitive trajectory, and functional independence. Losing it quietly, daily, through a habit that feels passive, is a problem that compounds invisibly. The way you hold the phone matters. How long you hold it matters. And the accumulated hours over months and years matter in a way that most people never connect to anything. Now, the third thing, this one tends to surprise people because it involves not just what you're doing on the phone, but when. Evening scrolling is physiologically different from daytime scrolling, not just because of the blue light, that's the part people know about, but for a reason that goes deeper than light exposure and that specifically targets adults over 50 in ways that younger users don't experience to the same degree. Melatonin production after 50 is already reduced. The pineal gland, which regulates your sleep-wake chemistry, becomes less responsive with age. The margin between a night of restorative sleep and a night of fragmented, low-quality sleep gets narrower. You have less buffer. Evening phone use doesn't just delay melatonin. In people over 50, it can disrupt the architecture of the sleep that follows, particularly the slow-wave phases, the deep sleep stages where growth hormone is released, where cellular repair happens, where the cardiovascular system undergoes its nightly maintenance. You can get 8 hours of sleep and still wake up biologically depleted if those deep stages were shortened or fragmented. This is why people in their 50s and 60s often say they sleep but don't feel rested. They're not imagining it. The sleep is happening, but the repair isn't. And the phone is frequently a contributing factor that nobody names because it doesn't feel like a problem while you're doing it. It feels like relaxing. The body is doing something very different than relaxing. If you watch this channel and find value in what I share here, pressing that subscribe button takes 3 seconds, and it means you'll see the next time I put something like this together. I don't publish constantly, only when there's something worth your time. That matters to me. The fourth habit is one that I genuinely want you to pay attention to, because it connects to something I see causing real, long-term problems in people who have no idea it's happening. It's the combination of phone use and stillness, not just sitting. Sitting in one fixed position for extended periods while using a phone, which is how most people use it. Slouched on a couch, lying in bed, seated at a kitchen table without moving. The body is static. The posture is compressed. After 50, blood flow to the lumbar region, the hip flexors, and the deep spinal stabilizers is already somewhat reduced compared to earlier decades. The muscles responsible for holding your spine in alignment, the small postural muscles that don't get used in passive sitting, begin to lose tone more quickly if they're not regularly activated. What extended phone use does, practically, is train the body into a pattern of collapse. The head migrates forward, the thoracic spine rounds, the hip flexors shorten. The deep abdominals disengage. None of this is painful while it's happening. It accumulates over months and years, and then one day, something as simple as reaching for something on a shelf or bending to pick something up from the floor goes differently than expected. Falls in adults over 50 are not random events. They're usually the end point of a long process of postural deterioration and muscle inactivity that nobody noticed because it happened in the background of ordinary daily life. Extended phone use, the way people actually use phones, accelerates that process. The position your body is in while you scroll is doing something to your body that you'll feel later. Just not yet. Fifth, this one is about your eyes, and it's not what you think. Yes, prolonged screen exposure causes eye strain. That's well documented. But the more specific concern for people over 50 involves something called accommodative flexibility. the eye's ability to shift focus between near and far distances. Starting in the mid-40s, the lens of the eye becomes progressively less elastic. Most people notice this as needing reading glasses, but what many people don't understand is that the muscle system that controls lens flexibility, the ciliary muscles, can either be maintained or progressively weakened depending on how you use your eyes. When you spend extended periods focused at a fixed near distance, which is exactly what phone use requires, you are holding the ciliary muscles in a sustained contraction at one specific focal length for hours, daily. You are not giving them the range of motion they need to maintain functional flexibility. The clinical consequence is that accommodative flexibility declines faster than it would otherwise. Distance vision can become more inconsistent. The eye fatigues more rapidly when switching contexts. Headaches tied to visual effort become more frequent, and there's something else that people almost never connect to their phones: increased light sensitivity. The retina, after 50, is more vulnerable to photochemical stress from sustained screen exposure. The eyes may start to feel more sensitive to bright light, more easily fatigued in certain environments. People assume this is just aging. In many cases, it's aging accelerated by a specific daily habit. The distance from which you hold your phone, how often you look away, how long your sessions last. All of this is shaping your visual trajectory in a direction that only becomes visible once it's already moved significantly. There's a sixth thing, and I'm going to be direct here because I think this one is underestimated. It's the effect of constant information exposure on the stress physiology of the body after 50. The phone is not just a screen. It's a continuous input device. News, social comparison, arguments, notifications, uncertainty, conflict, outrage, urgency. Even the good content, even this, is more input on top of a nervous system that, after 50, has a changed relationship with stress hormones. Cortisol regulation changes with age. The HPA axis, the hormonal stress response system, becomes less efficient at returning to baseline after activation. In younger people, a stressful input triggers a cortisol spike and then a fairly quick return to normal. In adults over 50, that return to baseline takes longer. And if inputs are frequent enough, which phone use almost by definition ensures, cortisol never fully normalizes. Sustained elevated cortisol has specific well-documented effects on the aging body. It accelerates muscle loss. It disrupts blood sugar regulation. It impairs sleep quality. It contributes to arterial stiffness. It affects hippocampal function, the brain region most associated with memory consolidation. This means that the act of scrolling through content that activates your nervous system, and most content is specifically designed to do exactly that, is, in a measurable biological sense, aging you, not metaphorically, physiologically. The stress response is real even when you don't consciously feel stressed. The body is responding to inputs the conscious mind has learned to normalize. What people over 50 are doing when they scroll their feeds for an hour before bed is not winding down. At the cellular level, they are activating a stress response system that is already less efficient than it used to be at the precise moment when the body most needs to begin its nightly recovery sequence. This is a conversation worth having with yourself honestly, not about the phone exactly, about what the phone is delivering to your nervous system and what that delivery is costing your biology. Before I get to the seventh, and this last one is the one I think matters most because it connects everything together, I want to say something. If you've watched this far, it's because something here resonated, because some part of what I've described matches something you've noticed, even if you hadn't put words to it. The stiffness, the fatigue, the sleep that doesn't quite restore, the eyes that tire more easily, the body that seems to respond differently than it used to. Those things are real, and you are not imagining them. The question is never whether the aging is happening. The question is always what's accelerating it and what's not. If that question matters to you, and I think it does, or you wouldn't be here, hit the like button on this video. That's how I know this kind of content is worth making more of. And leave a comment below telling me which of these 6 things you recognized in yourself, because I read those, and it shapes what I cover next. The 7th habit is the one that connects all the others, and it's the most invisible of all. It's the progressive displacement of physical activity by phone use. Not the obvious displacement, not, I used to go to the gym and now I don't. Something much subtler. The micro-movements that used to fill the gaps of daily life have been systematically replaced by phone time, and most people didn't notice it happening because it happened gradually over years. The moments between tasks, waiting for coffee to brew, waiting in a car, sitting in a waiting room, walking to another room, used to contain spontaneous movement. Standing up, stretching, walking, fidgeting, looking around, engaging the body in small ways. These micro-movements were not exercise, but they were continuous, low-level physical engagement that maintained circulation, activated postural muscles, moved lymph, and kept the body's chemistry oriented toward activity. The phone filled those gaps. And those gaps, it turns out, were not empty space. They were functional. Research on what's called sedentary behavior, distinct from simply not exercising, shows that the pattern of prolonged stillness, punctuated by brief movement, is metabolically very different from continuous movement throughout the day. Even people who exercise regularly but spend the majority of their waking hours in sustained stillness show measurable changes in blood sugar regulation, triglyceride levels, and vascular function. After 50, the body's ability to buffer the effects of prolonged stillness decreases. The metabolic flexibility that allowed younger bodies to sit for hours without significant consequence is reduced. The threshold lowers. What this means practically is that 2 people can have identical exercise habits and identical diets, and the one whose phone use has progressively eliminated incidental daily movement will show measurably different biological markers, not because of what they chose to do, but because of what silently disappeared from the texture of their daily life. This is perhaps the most difficult thing to address because it doesn't feel like a choice. It doesn't feel like a trade-off. It feels like doing nothing, which is precisely what makes it so effective at compounding year after year without triggering any alarm. The total number of minutes you spend with your body in static position while engaged with a screen is probably higher than you think, not because you're lazy, because the phone is extraordinarily good at occupying attention in a way that eliminates the felt need to move. That's a feature of the technology, not a personal failing. But the biology doesn't care about intent. Here's what I want to leave you with, and I want to say it plainly. None of these 7 things are dramatic. Not one of them, in isolation, on a single day, does anything you'd notice. That's the mechanism. The damage is in the accumulation, the repetition, the slow shaping of the body by habits that feel neutral because they feel comfortable and familiar. The body after 50 is not fragile, but it is less forgiving than it was. The margin between a habit that costs nothing and a habit that costs something real has narrowed. And the phone, specifically the phone, in the way that most people use it, sits inside that narrowed margin in multiple ways simultaneously. What I've described today is not meant to frighten you. It's meant to make what was invisible visible, because once you see it, you have choices you didn't have before. Small ones, meaningful ones. The kind that don't require overhauling your life, but do require looking honestly at what a specific object, used in a specific way, is doing to your specific biology. You came here because you wanted to understand your body better. That impulse is exactly right. Keep following it.